Chapter 1, Introduction to Truth and Deception. Amid the endless fields, where golden sunlight streamed down like shimmering threads and the wind whispered through the grass, there lay a small village beside a quiet river. At first glance, it was an unremarkable place, no grand castles, no legendary tales passed down through generations. Yet beneath its serene surface pulsed a silent question in the hearts of its people: what is truth, and why does it seem to elude us? It wasn't a question spoken aloud, but a deep, gnawing unease that wove itself into their evenings by the fire, their prayers in the modest church, and their distant gazes toward the horizon. Life here appeared peaceful, but beneath that calm flowed undercurrents of deception. Whispers passed between neighbors about secrets no one dared voice, tales of faith twisted over time, and doubts that not everything preached in their gatherings was as clear as daylight. Deception wasn't just blatant lies, it was subtler, lurking in the things they took for granted, in beliefs handed down unquestioned through the ages. And in the realm of the spirit, where people sought the deepest meaning of existence, this deception seemed more perilous than ever. Then, one day, like a sudden beam piercing the darkness, a channel called then the divine spoken emerged. No one knew its exact origin. Some said it was a gift from an awakened soul, others believed it answered their silent prayers. It was unlike anything they'd encountered. A warm, resonant voice declared, "We have lived too long in the shadow of lies. It's time for truth to shine, for the light of God to illuminate the corners the enemy seeks to hide." These weren't mere words, it was a call, a mission etched into every syllable, to help people see that truth wasn't a luxury but a flame to be kindled in every heart. From that moment, a quiet wave began to spread. No one led it, no one claimed to be its pioneer, but all felt the shift. Some dusted off old Bibles from forgotten shelves, rereading lines they'd once overlooked. Others sat beneath the ancient tree by the river, listening to then the divine spoken through crackling old phones, letting the words sink in like cool water. Still others scribbled thoughts in notebooks: do I truly know the truth, or am I living in a dream woven from lies? This journey had no single face, no name to define it. It belonged to all, to those who once thought the world was simply light and dark, only to discover a gray expanse filled with traps. Truth, they began to realize, wasn't easily grasped. It demanded courage to question, patience to listen, and faith to walk forward despite the fog ahead. But what they didn't yet know, what then the divine spoken would soon reveal, was that the greatest enemy of truth wasn't doubt, but an ancient force manipulating from the shadows. That story would unfold in the next chapter, where the darkness named Satan would take shape. Chapter 2, Satan and Spiritual Warfare. As the sky turned a fiery orange at dusk, the little village by the river remained outwardly still. Yet within its people, an invisible battle simmered. No one heard the roar of guns or the clash of swords, but all sensed it, a vague tension, as if something lurked in the shadows, waiting to strike. Then the divine spoken had planted a seed. Truth wasn't just a light to seek, but a battlefield where an ancient enemy roamed. And that enemy bore a name they all knew but few truly understood: Satan. In the channel's next videos, the familiar voice spoke of Satan's role in distorting truth, not as a horned devil from fairy tales, but as a master manipulator, sowing doubt and lies with honeyed whispers. "He doesn't want you to know the truth," the voice said, "because truth is the power that frees you from his chains." Those words made the villagers pause. They recalled moments when they doubted their prayers were heard, when their faith wavered without reason. Could those fleeting thoughts be arrows from an unseen foe? The channel pointed them to scriptures Satan allegedly feared. One evening, beneath the flickering light of the old church, a small group gathered, clutching worn Bibles. They turned to Ephesians 6:12, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. The words sent a chill through the room. They realized this fight wasn't just in their minds, it was a spiritual war beyond the reach of their eyes. Satan, dubbed the father of lies in John 8:44, didn't just want them to doubt God, he wanted them to doubt themselves, to doubt the light sleeping within them. Another verse, Revelation 12:9, described Satan as that old serpent, who deceives the whole world. These weren't distant words on a page anymore, they were a living warning. They began to see Satan not as an enemy standing before them, but as a shadow slipping into every corner of life, in the lies they'd accepted, the fears that silenced them, the moments they abandoned truth because it seemed too far off. He didn't need to destroy them with force, he only needed them to believe darkness was all they had. Yet then the divine spoken didn't leave them with just an enemy's portrait. It sparked hope. If Satan feared truth so much, then that truth must hold immense power. Evenings by the river became times of reflection, where they wondered, if Satan fights to hide the light, how radiant must it be? They didn't have all the answers, but they knew their journey had just begun. Powerful scriptures, weapons against the dark, awaited them in the next chapter. As the night breeze carried the scent of wild grass, they felt this spiritual war wasn't meant for defeat, but for victory through truth, faith, and an unquenchable light. Chapter 3, Exploring Powerful Scriptures. As the first dawn broke, gilding the thatched roofs of the little village, the air seemed to hum with a new energy. Birds chirped in harmony with the river's gentle flow, but within the people, a quiet fire had ignited. From their evenings with then the divine spoken, they were no longer content to drift through life with old routines. They'd learned that spiritual warfare wasn't distant, and Satan, truth's foe, couldn't win if they wielded the weapons he dreaded most, powerful, hidden scriptures buried in the dust of neglect. In a new video, the steady voice declared, "There are scriptures Satan trembles before, not because they're words, but because they're living power, light that banishes darkness." It was an invitation, and the villagers embarked on a quest. They gathered under the sprawling boughs of the old banyan tree by the river, armed with Bibles, paper, and eager hearts. No one led, no one commanded, only a shared urge drove them to unearth the treasures within those sacred pages. The first verse they uncovered was Psalm 91:4, "He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge, his faithfulness will be your shield and rampart." As one read it aloud, silence fell. They pictured God's invisible wings as a shelter amid the storms of doubt and fear Satan sowed. Someone whispered, "If this is true, why do we let ourselves tremble before the dark?" This wasn't just a promise, it affirmed that faith's light could guard them against unseen arrows. Next, they turned to Romans 8:31, "If God is for us, who can be against us?" The words rang like thunder in a clear sky. They grasped that Satan didn't fear their strength, but the strength of God behind them. These verses mattered not just for their beauty on the page, but as weapons in daily life, a reminder that whenever they faced lies, doubt, or despair, they weren't alone. One scribbled, "This isn't just words, it's power to stand firm." But the verse that stunned them most was Matthew 16:19, "I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." When the video explained this granted them authority to resist Satan's deception, it felt like they'd been handed a sword of light. That power didn't lie in complex rituals or lengthy prayers, but in their faith that truth could shatter every chain the enemy forged. Why did these matter in daily life? They found answers in the moments that followed. A mother reading Psalm 91 before her child slept felt peace replace constant worry. A farmer murmuring Romans 8:31 amid a barren field found strength to persist despite a failed harvest. And someone facing a mirror, battling inner lies, recalled Matthew 16:19, thinking, I have the power to loose truth and bind darkness. These weren't mere words, they were living light, a flame guiding them through the darkest days. Under the banyan tree, they didn't just uncover scriptures, they uncovered themselves. They understood Satan feared these words because they bridged humanity to God's power, proving light always outshone darkness. But their journey didn't end there. To wield these weapons fully, they needed to bring them into life, and that began with the mighty prayers of the Psalms, as the next chapter would reveal. As the sun dipped low, they departed with burning hearts, ready for what lay ahead, knowing truth wasn't just to be sought, it was to be lived. Chapter 4, Practicing Prayer with the Psalms. As silvery moonlight spread across the river, the little village sank into a deep stillness, broken only by crickets and rustling leaves in the night breeze. Yet within the humble homes, oil lamps flickered, symbols of souls unwilling to rest. Having discovered powerful scriptures, they didn't want to stop at knowing them on paper, they yearned to weave them into life, to make them a fire warming their families, a shield guarding against lurking darkness. And then the divine spoke and showed them the way, praying with the Psalms. In a new video, the warm voice guided them through overlooked pages of scripture. The Psalms aren't just ancient poems, it said, but living prayers, spiritual weapons to dispel deception and bring peace. The words were a cool breeze across their minds. They'd once thought prayer was complex, requiring grand rituals or eloquent phrases. Now they saw the Psalms' words of King David and old prophets as a gift for all, from muddy-handed farmers to elders by the window. They began with Psalm 23, familiar yet newly profound. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures, he leads me beside still waters. A mother, sleepless with worry for her children, tried reciting it before bed. That night, instead of restless dreams, she sank into an odd calm, as if an unseen hand soothed her soul. She whispered to her husband, "This isn't just poetry, it's power." From then on, she read Psalm 23 each night as a shield, protecting her family from the nameless fears Satan sowed. The channel taught them to use Psalm 91, dubbed the shield of faith. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. An elderly man, his faith shaken by years of illness, began reciting it each morning. He didn't seek instant healing, just a sliver of peace amid pain. Miraculously, though his body remained frail, his spirit grew strong. He told his neighbors, "It's like an invisible wall around me, keeping the darkness out." His tale spread, and soon others tried it, reading Psalm 91 in the fields facing hard days, Oregon, when doubt crept in. But it wasn't just prayers, success stories amazed them. A family torn by lies and misunderstandings turned to Psalm 133 daily, "Behold, how good and pleasant it is when brothers dwell in unity." The wife prayed silently, saying nothing to her husband or children. A week later, her husband apologized for past harsh words, and the kids began talking instead of fighting. She couldn't explain it logically, but she knew prayer had unlocked a door Satan had sealed shut. They learned praying the Psalms wasn't just reciting, it was living them. One jotted down a method: read slowly, let each word sink in, then silently ask God to make them real in their lives. They didn't need to pray loudly or kneel in church, just a quiet corner, a moment by the river, or a pause in the fields. The Psalms became their breath, the heartbeat of their faith, the light they carried daily. As the moon faded to dawn, they felt the change. Their families were less easily split by lies. They stood firmer against fear. The Psalms taught them prayer wasn't just asking, it was claiming light's power over darkness. But their journey wasn't over. Ahead lay prophecies and messages from God, lifting them to new heights in the next chapter. As daylight broke, they were ready, psalms in their hearts and faith in their hands. Chapter 5, Prophecies and Messages from God. As days passed in the little village by the river, light was no longer just sun rays through leaves or flickering lamps at night. It had become something deeper, more alive, kindling within souls once content with stillness and routine. From mighty scriptures to psalm prayers, they'd learned to stand against deception's darkness. But then the divine spoken pressed further. In a new video, the voice took on a mysterious, urgent tone. Truth isn't just in what's written, it's in what's revealed. Prophecies and messages from God are the lighthouse guiding us through these chaotic times. Prophecy, those two words froze the village air. They'd thought prophecies belonged to ancient days, to long-bearded seers shouting God's word amid thunder and fire. But the channel opened a new door. Prophecies weren't just past, they were present, living messages. God sent them now. One evening, under the eaves of the village's largest house, they gathered to hear a recording from then the divine spoken. The voice spoke of Joel 2:28, "And it shall come to pass afterward, that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh, your sons and daughters shall prophesy, your old men shall dream dreams, and your young men shall see visions." The words sparked like lightning. Were they, too, part of this promise? The channel shared prophecies they believed God was speaking to the world today, messages of awakening, of light's return amid reigning darkness. One oft-repeated call was to return to truth. "Awake, for the enemy prowls like a roaring lion, but I have given you power to tread on its head." They didn't know who first received these words, but they felt their weight. One scribbled, hand trembling, "If this is from God, we can't keep living as before." These messages could transform lives not through instant miracles, but by stirring the soul. A farmer, once fixated on the soil without looking up, began mornings in silence, hoping for a sign, a whisper. One day, amid a parched field, an odd peace washed over him, as if someone said, "Fear not, I am with you." No vision, no voice, just peace enough to keep going with newfound faith. He shared his story by the river, and eyes lit up. "If God still speaks, we're not alone," someone murmured. Another message warned, "The end times draw near, but do not fear, prepare." They weren't sure if it foretold the world's end or urged wakefulness. Instead of panic, they felt empowered. A family began evening prayers together, not just for themselves but the village, believing prophecy built rather than destroyed. A wayward youth abandoned old habits, saying, "If God's speaking, I want to hear." His life didn't change overnight, but step by step, he found purpose he'd never known. These prophecies and messages weren't just words, they were a wind sweeping the village, carrying hope and challenge. They learned to listen with their hearts, trusting God still moved among them. But to live in these messages' light, they needed to break free from deception's lingering chains. How to identify and escape that darkness? The answer lay ahead in the next chapter, where their spiritual journey would deepen into true freedom. As the moon waned, they rose, hearts eager, knowing God's words weren't just promises, they were a call to change forever. Chapter 6, Seeking Spiritual Liberation. As summer days shortened and autumn's cool breath swept through the little village, the river flowed on, mirroring the stars in the night sky. But within its people surged another current, a tide of awakening. They'd heard powerful scriptures, prayed the Psalms, and heeded prophecies from then the divine spoken. Yet they realized knowing truth wasn't enough, they needed to live it, to break free from the invisible cords Satan had wound around their souls. This chapter wasn't just discovery, it was action, the path to spiritual liberation. The voice from the channel spoke one misty morning: deception isn't just out there, it's within us, in false beliefs, fears, and unhealed wounds. To find light, you must name the darkness and step out of it. The words were a mirror, reflecting each villager's heart. They asked themselves, what holds me back? What keeps me from drawing closer to God? Thus began their quest for freedom, not with long strides on dusty roads, but in quiet moments facing their innermost selves. The first step, per the channel's guidance, was identifying deception. They looked at the lies Satan had planted over the years. A woman recalled believing she was unworthy of love, that God had forsaken her after past mistakes. By the river, Bible in hand, she read Romans 8:1, "There is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus." The words cut through her self-doubt like a blade. She whispered, "I believed a lie too long." Whenever doubt resurfaced, she spoke the verse aloud, a declaration of victory over the enemy. A man realized his deception was fear of the future. He'd thought his life was a meaningless string of days, devoid of hope. The channel pointed him to Jeremiah 29:11, "For I know the plans I have for you, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope." He wrote it on a scrap of paper, kept it in his pocket, and touched it when anxiety flared. Slowly, fear faded, replaced by belief that his life held greater purpose. To break free, they didn't stop at recognition, they practiced methods to strengthen their spiritual lives and faith. One was a prayer of banishment, based on Psalm 35:5, "Let them be like chaff before the wind, with the angel of the Lord driving them away." They learned to pray boldly, not just asking but commanding darkness to flee, trusting God's power flowed through their words. A youth, besieged by negative thoughts, tried this in a field, shouting, "Leave me, in God's name." No reply came, but a strange lightness enveloped him, as if a burden lifted. Another method was stillness and listening. They set aside daily moments to sit quietly, not speaking or asking, just letting God speak through silence. An elder, who'd thought faith was outward acts, found that in stillness, he felt God's presence more vividly than ever. He said, "I saw no vision, but I knew He was there. That's enough to make me stronger." They also learned forgiveness for others and themselves, since deception often rooted in old wounds. A family, once divided by misunderstandings, gathered and read Psalm 103:12, "As far as the east is from the west, so far does He remove our transgressions from us." They wept, embraced, and felt resentment's cord snap. Liberation wasn't just personal, it spread, binding them together. As autumn leaves drifted onto the river, they were no longer captives of deception. They'd found freedom, not perfect, but enough to move forward. They knew the spiritual journey was lifelong, and the next chapter would call them to walk it on their own. With each prayer, scripture, and silent moment, they became beacons, ready to shine truth's light into the world. Chapter 7, The Personal Spiritual Journey. As autumn faded into winter's chill, the little village by the river took on a deeper stillness. Winds carried the last golden leaves, and smoke curled from small hearths. Yet beneath this calm burned another flame, a fire in awakened souls. They journeyed through truth's discovery, faced Satan, wielded mighty scriptures, prayed the Psalms, heard prophecies, and freed themselves from deception. Now, then the divine spoke and led them to a crossroads. The spiritual journey wasn't a collective tale, but a personal path to light. The voice spoke one gray afternoon, clouds thick overhead, "Each of you has a unique journey. Truth isn't just to know, it's to live. Start today, with yourself, and let God guide every step. The words rang like a bell, rousing them from thinking faith was a shared glow rather than their own. They realized that, despite learning and praying together, each carried a story, a wound, a longing, and God waited to walk with them on that road. One frosty morning, a man began his journey. Nameless and unremarkable, he'd once lived unquestioningly. Beneath the old banyan, he opened his Bible, letting his fingers drift across the pages. They stopped at Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. The words pierced the mist like a ray. He'd thought himself too weak to change, but now he said, if God's in me, I can walk. He started each day with this verse, not just to recall, but to believe, and step by step, he grew stronger, no longer bound by inadequacy. An elderly woman with silver hair chose silence's path. She'd once seen faith as loud prayers in church, but after then the divine spoken, she sat by her window, eyes closed, listening. No grand visions, no heavenly voice, just peace seeping in, like water over parched land. She found her journey didn't need noise, it could be quiet moments where God felt nearer than ever. Some wrote their journeys. A small notebook became a haven for thoughts, prayers, and victories over darkness. One scrawled line read, today, I forgave someone who hurt me. I couldn't do it alone, God helped me. Those pages weren't just memories, they were proof of progress, however slow. In sum, they saw this journey had no earthly end, it was a lifelong road, each step a chance to near truth. Key lessons stood clear, truth outshone Satan's lies, scriptures and psalms were weapons to stand firm, prophecies were guiding beacons, liberation was the door to freedom. Above all, they knew the spiritual journey wasn't a burden, it was a gift, God's call to become their truest selves. As winter's first sun broke through the clouds, glinting on the river, they heard a call to act, don't wait. Begin today. Seek truth, live in light, and let God lead you through darkness. No one knew what tomorrow held, but fear had faded. They rose, each on their own path, yet bound for one destination, eternal light that never dims. And as winter's wind carried hope's breath, they knew their story, personal or shared, would forever be a flame lighting the world.